For decades, Sylvester Stallone and Bruce Willis weren't just two action legends. They were brothers, carved from the same granite of Hollywood's toughest era. Before the headlines, before the tension, before the storm that would eventually tear them apart, the two men shared a connection that felt more like destiny than coincidence. They came from nothing. They survived everything. And together, they rose to define an entire generation of action cinema. Their friendship began long before the Expendables ever existed. In the late 80s and 90s, when the world worshipped muscle-bound heroes, Stallone and Willis weren't rivals. They were allies. They built Planet Hollywood with Arnold Schwarzenegger, turning their superstardom into a multi-million-dollar empire. Fans didn't just watch their movies, they ate burgers under the same props that made these men legends. Behind the glitz, though, what truly bonded them was something far more human, the understanding of how brutal the climb to the top had been. Stallone, the underdog who wrote Rocky in 3 desperate nights and gambled his entire future on starring in it. Willis, the bartender turned superstar who broke rules and expectations with Die Hard, proving that vulnerability and charisma could coexist inside an action hero. They saw themselves in each other. They respected the fight in one another, and that unspoken respect became the foundation of a friendship Hollywood believed would last forever. But no one knew then that the same world that brought them together would eventually break them apart. By the early 1990s, their relationship had evolved into something even deeper than shared fame. It became a partnership, one that blended friendship with ambition. Alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger and Demi Moore, Stallone and Willis launched Planet Hollywood, a bold, star-powered restaurant chain that combined movie nostalgia with business brilliance. The idea was explosive. Fans could walk into a Planet Hollywood and suddenly feel like they were stepping onto a movie set. Props from Rocky, Terminator, Die Hard, all hanging above tables, where families laughed and tourists snapped photos. And at the center of this empire were the 3 titans of action cinema, united as both icons and entrepreneurs. To the world, this alliance was symbolic. 3 giants, once seen as box office competitors, were now building something together, something meant to last for generations. Off-screen, Stallone and Willis also shared a strikingly parallel lives. Both were navigating the chaos of fame while trying to stay present for their families. Both had endured heartbreak, failed marriages, and the relentless targeting of tabloids. And both understood the loneliness that comes with being revered by millions, but truly known by only a few. At parties and red carpets, the two men were often photographed laughing, teasing, and leaning into each other like war buddies reliving old battles. Stallone once praised Willis as a man who could make danger look charming, while Willis admired Stallone's refusal to ever stop working, fighting, or reinventing himself. It was friendship built not on words, but on survival. 2 men who had seen the world try to break them and still managed to rise side by side. No one could have predicted that the seeds of tension were already quietly being planted, seeds that would one day grow into a rift powerful enough to shatter everything they had built. When Stallone conceived The Expendables in 2009, it wasn't just another action film, it was a love letter to an era, a salute to the warriors who carried Hollywood on their shoulders long before CGI replaced grit, sweat, and bruises. And in Stallone's mind, there was one man who absolutely belonged beside him, Bruce Willis. Casting Willis as Mr. Church, the enigmatic CIA strategist, wasn't merely a business decision. It was personal. It was symbolic. It was Stallone's way of saying, brother, we've walked through decades of fire. Let's show the world we've still got it. In the first film, their dynamic was electric. Stallone, the fearless leader charging into danger. Willis, the puppet master with sharp wit and sharper instincts. Even though Willis's role was brief, it was unforgettable, just enough to remind audiences how deeply rooted these two men were in the DNA of action cinema. And the world responded. The Expendables exploded at the box office, raking in over $274 million globally. It revived Stallone's career, reignited Willis's iconic status, and sparked a renaissance for classic action heroes. When the second film came in 2012, everything felt even bigger. More stars, more spectacle, more nostalgia. On set, Stallone and Willis shared jokes, stories, and memories. They weren't just co-stars, they were generals returning for one more victory lap. Fans believed the camaraderie was real, because it was. But beneath that surface, something fragile had already begun to shift. Tiny cracks, barely noticeable, were forming. And soon, pressure, pride, ego, and expectations would collide in a way that neither man saw coming. The storm was on its way, and when it hit, it would change everything. By 2013, The Expendables had evolved far beyond a film franchise. It had become a symbol, a brotherhood, a final sanctuary for action heroes who had defined an entire era. And for Stallone, there was no version of The Expendables 3 without Bruce Willis. Mr. Church was woven into the soul of the story. So when negotiations for the third installment began, Stallone reached out to Willis with the same expectation he'd always had: loyalty, camaraderie, and respect for the mission they had built together. But this time, things didn't go as expected. According to multiple reports from industry insiders, Stallone offered Willis $3 million for 4 days of filming in Bulgaria. For most actors, that was an extraordinary amount of money, almost unheard of for such a short shoot. But Willis said no. He wanted $4 million, just $1 million more. A small difference on paper, but to Stallone, it felt like a dagger, because Stallone didn't see this as a business negotiation. He saw it as a question of loyalty to the franchise, to the fans, and most painfully, to their decades-long friendship. As the talks collapsed, frustration turned to disappointment. Disappointment turned to resentment, and that resentment ignited a fire that neither man would forget. On August 6, 2013, Stallone made a shocking move. First, he announced that Harrison Ford would be joining the cast. Then, mere hours later, he sent out the tweet that would echo through Hollywood: greedy and lazy, a sure formula for a career failure. He didn't name Bruce Willis, but he didn't have to. The world connected the dots instantly. Headlines exploded. Social media erupted. Fans watched in disbelief as a private disagreement between two action titans became a public battlefield. The tweet was bold, cutting, and deeply personal. Behind the scenes, Willis was reportedly blindsided, humiliated, angry. Some sources claimed he felt Stallone had used him as a scapegoat for publicity. Others said Stallone felt Willis had lost his fire, that he no longer approached roles with passion, but with cold calculation. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: the bond they'd built over decades had been fractured in a single moment, and the world had witnessed it. After The Expendables 3 wrapped in 2014, the distance between Stallone and Willis became unmistakable. These were two men who had survived the toughest corners of Hollywood, yet now they couldn't survive each other. The warm smiles, the red carpet jokes, the brotherly banter, gone, replaced instead by a cold, heavy silence that stretched on for months. Hollywood insiders whispered endlessly. Some said Stallone felt deeply betrayed and had no intention of making peace. Others insisted Willis was furious and hurt that their private disagreement was blasted publicly across millions of screens. But beneath the tough exteriors, both men wore like armor. Something else was happening. Regret. A close friend later admitted that the Stallone quietly struggled with guilt. For all the machismo he showed the world, there was a softer part of him, one that remembered the early days, the Planet Hollywood dreams, the nights when he and Bruce laughed about life and the absurdity of fame. He wasn't proud of the outburst. He wasn't proud of the tweet. And even though he didn't say it publicly, he missed the friend he once had. Willis, meanwhile, offered no interviews, no comments, but silence can speak louder than anger, and his silence revealed how deeply the situation had cut him. Then, months later, something unexpected happened. Stallone broke the silence, not with a PR-crafted statement, not with a staged reunion, but with a simple, raw message on the same platform where everything had exploded. Made up with Bruce Willis, a stand-up guy. My mistake. Just 12 words. But they carried the weight of 12 years. Fans were stunned. Hollywood cheered, and for a brief, shining moment, it felt like the story might finally be heading toward peace. Behind the scenes, Stallone reached out privately. They exchanged calls, shared old memories, even joked softly about the tweet that had nearly ended their friendship. The ice had begun to melt, but fate wasn't done with them yet, because the most painful chapter of their story was still to come. For years, the tension between Stallone and Willis slowly faded into the background, neither fully resolved nor openly reignited. Life moved on, as it always does. Stallone dived into new projects like Creed, earning critical acclaim and reminding the world that he was far from finished. Willis, meanwhile, shifted toward smaller films supporting young directors, working quietly, steadily. Hollywood assumed the storm between them had passed. But then, March 2022 arrived. A single announcement from Bruce Willis's family changed everything. They revealed he had been diagnosed with aphasia, a devastating neurological disorder that attacks a person's ability to speak, understand language, and express thoughts. For an actor whose voice and presence had defined cinema for decades, it was the cruelest fate imaginable. The statement confirmed what many feared. Bruce Willis was retiring from acting. When Stallone heard the news, something inside him broke. Gone was the frustration, the pride, the disappointment. In its place was grief, raw, immediate, and overwhelming. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Stallone spoke with a softness almost never seen from him. His voice cracked, his eyes dimmed. Bruce is going through some really, really difficult times, he said quietly. He's been sort of incommunicado, and that kills me. It's so sad. The man he once called greedy, the man he fired publicly, the man he fought with over $1 million, was now fighting a battle far greater than Hollywood fame or ego. Stallone began sharing old photos of them together, laughing, posing on set, celebrating victories. Alongside them, he wrote heartfelt messages. We go way back, praying for the best for you and your wonderful family. No bitterness remained, no trace of anger, only compassion, respect, and the deep ache of watching a friend slip away into silence. For Stallone, the feud, once so consuming, now looked small compared to the fragility of life. Illness had stripped away everything unnecessary, and what remained was truth. A truth Stallone had ignored for too long. Even the strongest men fall, even legends are mortal, and sometimes forgiveness comes too late. Looking back, many people believed the Stallone-Willis fallout was simply about money. $1 million, 4 days of filming, a disagreement that spiraled out of control. But the truth ran much deeper. The clash wasn't born from greed. It was born from fear, exhaustion, and identity. Two men who had spent their entire lives fighting to stay relevant in an industry that discards its heroes the moment they slow down. Stallone had grown up in hardship, born with partial paralysis in his face, mocked by classmates, rejected by studios. He clawed his way to the top with nothing but determination and raw talent. Every win he earned felt like a miracle carved out of pain. Willis came from similar roots. Raised by a blue-collar family, after moving to New Jersey, he worked as a bartender and security guard. Before Die Hard changed his life, he was just another struggling dreamer praying for one chance. Both men had fought tooth and nail for the right to be seen, to be respected, to be remembered. By the 2010s, they weren't the hungry young warriors they once were. They were aging icons, still adored, but painfully aware that Hollywood no longer built movies around men like them. So when Willis asked for an extra million, Stallone didn't see it as negotiation. He saw it as betrayal. At a time when he was desperately trying to prove that their generation of action heroes still mattered. And perhaps Willis felt the opposite. Maybe he felt he'd earned the right to ask for what he believed he was worth. Maybe he was tired of stunts, tired of harsh schedules, tired of giving more than anyone realized. In the end, both men were defending something sacred, their dignity. Hollywood breeds insecurity like a factory. Every legend lives with the fear of fading, the fear of being replaced, the fear that the world will move on and forget, and that fear can twist even the closest friendships. Stallone once said in an interview, "People see the hero, but they don't see what it costs to stay one." That was the truth behind the feud. Not money, not ego. Two aging warriors fighting not each other, but the world that was slowly leaving them behind. As the years unfolded, something subtle yet powerful began to happen. The noise surrounding their feud faded. The headlines moved on. Hollywood, always hungry for the next scandal, shifted its attention elsewhere. But time kept teaching. Stallone continued creating, directing, and pushing himself into new horizons. Creed brought him unprecedented acclaim, Golden Globe wins, Oscar nominations, a rebirth he hadn't expected this late in his career. He was 40 years past Rocky, yet still fighting, still reinventing, still proving he belonged. Willis, too, kept working. Smaller films, independent directors, a slower pace. Some fans didn't understand why he kept saying yes to so many modest roles, but those closest to him saw something others didn't. He was changing. He was forgetting lines more often, struggling with communication, backing away from long conversations. Something deep inside him was shifting, and few realized what it meant. Yet even as their careers diverged, there remained a quiet mutual respect, an unspoken acknowledgement of the battles they had fought both together and apart. They never worked on screen again, but they were bonded by something stronger than fame, shared history. And then came the news in 2022, the revelation that Willis's declining clarity, his softened presence, his slowed speech had a heartbreaking cause, aphasia, a disease that steals the very thing an actor needs most, the ability to express emotion through language. It was cruel, it was merciless, and it hit Stallone harder than anyone realized. All the pride, all the hurt, all the ego, they evaporated instantly because suddenly the only thing that mattered was compassion. Stallone looked back and understood something profound. The fight between them had never been worth losing a friend. Success, power, franchises, money, none of it mattered anymore. When the face of illness, all that remained was the human heart. For Stallone, regret became a quiet companion. He realized there were apologies he could no longer fully speak, moments he could no longer reclaim, and a friendship he once took for granted that now lived only in memories and old photographs. Time had humbled them both, and in its wake, it left a simple truth. Forgiveness is the final victory, and sometimes the hardest one to earn. 2. Today, Sylvester Stallone is 79 years old, a living monument to resilience. He still acts, still directs, still paints, pouring his restless energy into art, refusing to let time silence the fire inside him. Bruce Willis, now 70, walks a very different path. He lives quietly, surrounded by his wife Emma and their daughters, who share soft, heartfelt glimpses of their lives, moments of music, smiles, and family warmth. Even as words fade from his grasp, his spirit remains unmistakably present, a strong, gentle, deeply loved, and Stallone feels that. He feels it every time he sees an old photo, every time he watches a clip of Die Hard or Pulp Fiction, every time he remembers the Planet Hollywood celebrations, the Expendables laughs, the late-night phone calls about life, work, and survival. Their story, once filled with fire, ego, and conflict, now feels almost poetic. Two men who shaped an era, two warriors who came from nothing, two friends who lost each other and somehow found peace through time and pain and understanding. When Stallone finally opened up about the real reason he couldn't work with Willis again, it wasn't about betrayal or business. It wasn't even about that infamous $1 million. It was about how deeply a wound can cut when it comes from someone you once called a brother. But life has a way of softening hearts. Illness has a way of revealing what truly matters. And in the end, Stallone spoke not with anger but with love. "We've been friends for so long," he said softly. "He's a true fighter. I just hope he keeps fighting." That is the final truth of their story. Not the feud, not the tweet, not the negotiations, but the bond, imperfect, human, unforgettable. A legacy built on loyalty, broken by pride, healed by time. Hollywood is full of rivalries, but rare, so rare, are stories that end with forgiveness. Stallone and Willis gave the world action heroes, but in the end, they taught something far more meaningful, that even legends bleed, even warriors grow old, and even the greatest friendships can break, only to find their way back through compassion. In the end, the story of Sylvester Stallone and Bruce Willis is not a story about Hollywood. It's not a story about money, fame, or movie contracts. It is a story about humanity, about how pride can fracture even the strongest bonds, about how time humbles us all, and about how compassion can mend wounds that once felt impossible to heal. Their journey, from brothers in arms to bitter rivals and finally to quiet reconciliation, reminds us that even legends are just men navigating the fragile terrain of loyalty, fear, and forgiveness. Stallone continues forward, carrying both the victories and the regrets. Willis faces the hardest battle of his life, surrounded by love, protected by family, and honored by millions worldwide. And though their paths no longer cross on movie sets, their connection remains alive in the legacy they built together, a legacy of broken pride and restored humanity, a legacy that shows the world that real strength isn't measured by muscles or explosions, but by the courage to forgive. Now, the question returns to you. Do you believe Stallone was justified in standing his ground during the conflict? Or should he have handled everything differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this journey through Hollywood's hidden truth compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories behind the legends who shaped cinema as we know it.